Stephen, very good morning to you, and thank you very much for your time. On Monday here on ENCA, I interviewed a Mozambican academic, Adriano Novunga, who's based in Maputo, just to confirm reports of the escalation there. And he confirmed that the armed forces were preparing for a big battle in this past week there in Mozambique. So this conflict, which started 3 years ago, seemingly escalating.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, Dan. I hope you can see me okay. But yes, this conflict is gaining strength. As you said, it started in October 2017, and the Mozambican government has not been successful in suppressing it. It has grown legs and is becoming more and more serious. Over 1,000 people have lost their lives. Some 250,000 people have been internally displaced or become refugees. Whole towns are being taken over. People are being attacked. Buildings burnt, people killed. So it's a very serious conflict.
Now, Stephen, conflict, I hear some people debating it's an insurgency. Is it a civil war? I mean, 1,500 people, by the last count that I saw being reported by some media from northern Mozambique, 1,500 people have been killed, and as you said, more than 200,000 displaced. A number of towns have been attacked and occupied, including the strategic port of Musimbo at the Praia. Is this a civil war?
It's not a civil war, but it's a big conflict that's happening within the country. I think Cabo Delgado in the north has been quite neglected developmentally. It's far away from Maputo in the south. It hasn't had investment. It hasn't had infrastructure and services. And then, of course, about 10 years ago, huge natural gas deposits were discovered off the coast, which was set to transform the region. As international companies started to come in to extract that gas. But what we're seeing is something not dissimilar to what we have in the Niger Delta in Nigeria, where all the riches of the country come from a particular area, but it is completely poorly developed and riven with conflict. And the central government doesn't have a control and doesn't seem to know how to solve the problem.
Okay, and the government is describing it as terrorism and the violence is going on there. And Sadc, the regional body that is currently being chaired by Mozambique's president, Philippe Nyusi, he took over as chairperson currently last month. What can they do? I mean, last week, Thursday, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, telling Parliament that South Africa is just waiting for Mozambique to say what it needs.
So I think that's important. The way that Sadc is set up is they have a mutual defense pact, and so they can go into a country on the invitation of that country. Now, that hasn't quite, in those explicit terms, happened. But as you say, Mozambique has taken over the chairmanship of Sadc, and it's now on the agenda. It hasn't been on the agenda for the last couple of years. And sometimes countries fight to keep their problems off the agenda. Zimbabwe is a classic case of that. It really fights not to have Zimbabwe discussed by the Southern African leaders. I mean, there is a military capability, or the backbone of that is formed by South Africa, other countries like Zimbabwe. But, you know, we're overstretched. We've taken part in a number of different peacekeeping operations in the continent. Our battalions are tied up. South Africa's National Defense Force is chronically underfunded. We don't have the latest equipment. So, and also, the solution in Mozambique is not only a military one. It's going to have to be a social, political, socio-economic one as well. You can't just kill all the insurgents because more people will come up. It's really addressing those root causes, and I'm not sure that Sadc is equipped for that kind of operation.
But Stephen, equipped or not, the reality is Sadc cannot afford to see this conflict escalate and grow. You've got Tanzania just north of Cabo Delgado province, and off the coast, not far away, of course, we know piracy on the eastern side of Africa's coast on the Indian Ocean. You got Madagascar not far away and a few islands. They can't afford, because this region largely for years and years has been very stable and peaceful compared to your West Africans, your East Africans, and the Great Lakes region. So Sadc can better do something about this.
Absolutely, 100%. They do have to do something. It would be, I think there's been a little bit of complacency in that after South Africa's transition, there was no longer perceived as a threat in the region. So I don't think conflict has been taken seriously. But indeed, as you say, this can spill over to neighbors. It can spill over to Tanzania. Tanzania has moved its armed forces to the border to try and stop that. Off the coast, we have had piracy over the last decade. It's very serious. And you know, there seem to be some ISIS links with this group. That's not 100% clear. But if those sort of forces start coming to South Africa, we've got a big problem. And in fact, the leadership of this insurgency is very secretive. They don't always claim responsibility for attacks as some of the other groups like Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab generally do. But they have threatened South Africa to say if we get involved, that terror is going to come to our shores. And we have to be worried about that.
Yeah, we have to, especially because, I mean, I was telling my colleague here, Peter van Onselen, earlier, that I see some people talk about it being Al-Shabaab, but there's no real proof if they are linked to Al-Shabaab. Now there's ISIS, the IS link being mentioned, and there's been a South African link being mentioned, and all kinds of stories there. And finally, Stephen, should we expect more action? I'm asking from Sadc in this conflict in Mozambique, because at the end of the 40th summit that took place last month, the Secretariat was directed, the Sadc Secretariat, to prepare an action plan to be implemented, prioritizing measures to combat terrorism. Sadc regards what's happening, playing out there for the last 3 years in northern Mozambique as acts of terrorism, violent attacks, and cybercrime. Should we expect more action going forward now?
Let's hope so. I mean, I think the communique itself from the Sadc summit was very disappointing. There were a couple of lines. As you said, we condemn terrorism and we support the government of Mozambique in their fight. But Sadc absolutely needs a plan. It needs concrete ideas on how to solve this. And as I said, it can't just be solved with guns. It also has to be solved with finances. It has to be solved with social change. And it's very complex. This movement is growing all the time as it attracts disaffected youth, unemployed youth, problems that are very deep-seated.
And they're going to have to feel included in the benefits of those richer natural gas developments, activity that's already taking place there. Thank you very much, Stephen Gruesome from the South African Institute of International Affairs here in Johannesburg, as we look at what can Sadc do? Can it afford not to do anything as that conflict in northern Mozambique carries on and on over the last 3 years and recently seemingly escalating?